Quote, a committee led by Michigan Republicans today published an extraordinary debunking of voter fraud claims in the state, delivering a comprehensive rebuke to a litany of accusations about improprieties in the 2020 election. The 55-page report, produced by a Michigan Senate committee of 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat, is a systematic rebuttal to an array of false claims about the election from supporters of former President Donald Trump. The report is unsparing in its criticism of those who have promoted false theories about the election. It debunks claims from Trump allies, including Mike Lindell, the chief executive of MyPillow, and Rudolph Giuliani, the former president's lawyer, and even Mr. Trump himself. And this report from Michigan Republicans, it's actually not just unsparing criticism of the false claims about supposed fraud in the election and the people who have brought those false claims to public attention. The conservative-leaning Detroit News puts in their lead about this story tonight the fact that these Michigan Republicans are even now calling for the state of Michigan to investigate and potentially prosecute people who have been making these false fraud claims about the election. These claims that there was something supposedly so wrong in Michigan, particularly in Antrim County, Michigan, which has become a real buzzword for the Trump election fraud fantasists. It's been the real bullseye for a lot of very, very, very false claims by President Trump and his supporters. That's the Detroit News headline about it. Senate report recommends the Attorney General investigate false election fraud claims. But this is from the actual report. This is where they get that. Events in Antrim County, Michigan, sparked a significant amount of concern about the technology used to count ballots. This concern led to much speculation, assumptions, misinformation, and in some cases, outright lies meant to create doubt and confusion. The many hours of testimony before the committee showed these claims are unjustified and unfair to the people of Antrim County and the state of Michigan. It's also been unfair to the people across America. The county was mentioned by officials at the White House, in the media, at rallies, in several substantial online documentaries. The committee finds those promoting Antrim County, Michigan as the prime evidence of a nationwide conspiracy to steal the election. Those making those claims place all other statements and actions they make in a position of zero credibility. Ideas and speculation that Antrim County election workers or outside entities manipulated the vote by hand or electronically are indefensible. The committee is appalled at what can only be deduced as willful ignorance or avoidance of this proof, perpetuated by some leading such speculation. The committee recommends the Attorney General consider investigating those who have been utilizing misleading and false information about Antrim County to raise money or publicity for their own ends. So again, this is a Michigan Senate Republican investigation. And the Republicans in the Senate in Michigan say not only is the Antrim County, Michigan supposed fraud stuff total bunk, it's also so obviously bunk that people continuing to push that nonsense should potentially be criminally investigated for knowingly perpetrating a fraud. Wow. Okay, then. Having buried the Antrim County election fraud fantasies about 30 feet deep at that point, the Michigan Republicans writing this report then move on to just sort of systematically rip their way through all of the other Trump election fraud fantasy nonsense claims about their state. They investigate and they prove and ultimately conclude that no, tons of dead people did not vote in Michigan. They did find there was one old lady, a 92-year-old lady, who, quote, died 4 days before the November 2020 election. Research showed she had submitted her completed absentee ballot prior to the election and prior to her death. She did all her voting work prior to dying, turns out. They also found that no, hundreds of thousands of ballots were not wrongfully sent out to Michigan voters, despite claims to the contrary from President Trump and his supporters. They also found that not only were there no problems with the voting machines in Antrim County, Michigan, which has been, the bullseye for so many of their fake fraud claims, they found there were also no problems with the machines at the big tabulation center in Detroit. Instead, and this is remarkable, the Republican investigation found that the cause of the chaos at that Detroit counting center in the days after the election was actually the fault of the local Republican Party, because they called on Trump supporters to come down and mob the counting center to protest the count. The report actually says the local Republican Party in Detroit should repudiate, quote, the actions of certain individuals that created a panic and had untrained and unnumbered persons descending on the TCF Center. This is the state Michigan Senate Republicans saying, the Republican Party in Detroit caused panic and they should repudiate their members who did that. How about the incessant Trump claims that Michigan had more votes cast than Michigan has voters? Well, on page 25 of their report, Michigan Republicans have now published this handy table showing that in all the places Trump says that happened, including Detroit, there were actually not more votes cast than voters. Far from it. Even Jovan Pulitzer, the guy with the made-up name whose supposed secret artifact detection technology is being used in the Arizona audit, where they are recounting and doing Lord knows what to the Arizona ballots and voting machines. The Michigan Republicans examined testimony from Jovan Pulitzer about supposed election fraud and found his testimony to be, quote, untrue and a complete fabrication. They also looked at the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell, who has now turned the Trump's going to be reinstated thing into a traveling roadshow around the country. Michigan Senate Republicans looked carefully at Mike Lindell's claims about votes being stolen or switched or hacked somehow in Michigan. They found, quote, no such activities took place. They found Mike Lindell's claims to be, quote, beyond any statistical or reasonable credulity. They found his whole case about supposed election fraud in Michigan to be, quote, ignorant of the actual election process. So in sum, this report, again from Republicans in the Michigan State Senate, finds that the mishigas and noise and nonsense about the election somehow being stolen from Trump, it's bunk. They chased down every supposed conspiracy theory, every supposed scandal, and they found it to all be bunk. And they concluded in no uncertain terms that it ought to be treated as such. This was their conclusion. Quote, this committee found no evidence of widespread or systematic fraud in Michigan's prosecution of the 2020 election. Quote, the committee can confidently assert that it has been thorough in examination of numerous allegations of unlawful actions, improper procedures, fraud, vote theft, or any other description which would cause citizens to doubt the integrity of Michigan's 2020 election results. Our clear finding is that citizens should be confident the results represent the true results of the ballots cast by the people of Michigan. The committee strongly recommends citizens use a critical eye and ear toward those who have pushed demonstrably false theories for their own personal gain. Wow, right? So this is damning, right? This is indeed unsparing. No fraud in the Michigan election. No steal that needs to be stopped in Michigan. No actual significant problems of any kind with the Michigan vote. The people trying to sell you on the idea that there were problems in the election are ignorant or just wrong, or in some cases, they're consciously trying to defraud the American people, and they ought to be investigated and potentially criminally prosecuted for it. Wow. The Michigan Senate Republican, who's the chair of the committee that did this investigation, wrote this report debunking all the claims about supposed fraud in Michigan's election. He also serves on the Republican-controlled election committee in the Michigan State Senate. And on that committee, he and other Republicans are citing the widespread belief in all of these false conspiracy theories about fraud in the Michigan election as the reason Michigan needs, I kid you not, 39 new laws they are proposing this year to restrict voting in the state. Restricting absentee voting, restricting in-person voting, restricting early voting, restricting day of voting, restricting drop box voting. Literally just today, as they dropped this report saying there were no problems in Michigan's elections and all the fraud claims are all made up, at the same time, on the same day, today, Michigan Republicans advanced a new law that will dramatically toughen the state's voter ID standards, potentially disenfranchising tens of thousands of Michigan voters. because of all the worries about the integrity of the 2020 election in Michigan. The worries that they just debunked systematically as nonsense that's being promoted by fraudsters who are out to profit on it for their own purposes, who in some cases probably ought to be prosecuted for it. When you use something as a pretext, it means you're citing something as a justification for your actions, but you're going to do what you're going to do anyway, right? Regardless of whether or not you actually believe in the thing that you're citing to justify your actions, you're going to take those actions anyway. When you say false pretext, false is actually redundant. A pretext is, by definition, something that isn't the real justification for your actions. In this case, today in Michigan, Michigan Republicans have proven out loud and in great detail that they do not even believe their own stated justifications for why they are acting to rescind voting rights in draconian terms in the state of Michigan. They don't even believe their own justifications for it, but they're doing it anyway. This is one very clear snapshot of the Republican Party's approach to voting rights in the wake of the 2020 election.